Welcome everyone to, I think, one of my favorite Expo North digital shorts. I'm so happy to have Grier Wilt join us all the way from Russia. Hi, Grier.
Hi, nice to be here.
And we also have James from Expo North. Hi, James. Now, Grier is the Deputy Director of NASA Operations in Russia. Grier, is that correct?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
It's a very full title. It's an exciting title. I love your background too. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, again, my name is Grier Wilt. Right now, I'm serving as the Deputy Director of NASA Operations in Russia. Specifically, I'm located in Star City, Russia, where the Roscosmos, so it's like the Russian version of NASA, where their cosmonaut training center is. And that would be the equivalent of NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, where I used to work. So it's great being at kind of a sister city, if you will, and helping out with their operations.
That's so awesome. I think a lot of people have fantasies of going to Star City in Russia, I think, and also NASA in the States. So Grier, can you tell us a little bit about what your job looks like? Because you train the astronauts in order to go to the International Space Station, also walk them through problems if problems comes up. Is that right?
Yeah, well, previously I was an EVA flight controller and instructor. So that was spacewalk training and flight control. And so now this is more of a management position. So it's a little less, it's a little more hands off in terms of like working with the crew members for training. It's more supporting them while they're over here. Do they have what they need? It's really a jack of all trades job too. Anything from assisting with, public relations to observing their training schedule, making sure that they're meeting the training needs they need to for their specific mission. For example, every crew member who goes to the space station will train over here, but if they're launching on the Soyuz, their training is going to be a lot more intense than maybe somebody on a visiting vehicle, such as SpaceX or a Boeing vehicle. So just a little bit of everything, making sure the crew members have what they need over here since they're going to be away from their families and from kind of a common world.
That's amazing. Okay, so tell us a little bit about what the world looks like now and maybe a little bit where it's going. So you did a launch in October? Is that right?
I'm sorry?
Did you do a launch in October?
Yes, we just had, I personally didn't go due to COVID. We had a reduced presence there, and that was a Russian Soyuz launch in Kazakhstan. That's where Russia launches all of their vehicles from, at least presently. And we had one US crew member, Kate Rubins, and then two Russian Soyuz crew members launched together on the Soyuz. And then, of course, we just had the Crew One SpaceX vehicle launch from Florida in the United States. So it's kind of cool to see, and we're going to eventually have Boeing join the gamut too. So it's great to see multiple, one just for redundancy, but then also multiple players, contributing to the launch landscape.
That's awesome. Okay, so for people who are totally unfamiliar with this landscape, and I know sometimes things are a little uncertain in terms of budgets, but in terms of the hopes of NASA and where things are going and the directive behind it, can you tell us a little bit about the spirit of missions now, what the aims are, what we're hoping to learn, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this month actually is NASA's like 20th, well, the International Space Station's 20th birthday in space, which is fascinating. For us, maybe like growing up, we aren't really thinking about it, but for anyone under the age of 20, there has always been a human living in space, which is kind of wild to think about, right? Obviously, it's not the same human, and they rotate out every, 6 months to a year. But that's a pretty incredible feat, and that was only done as a result of international collaboration. And that's not just obviously Russia, where I am, but Russia, the United States, ESA, our European Space Agency, Canada, Japan. So we've had a lot of international collaboration to make that happen. And it took years to build it up to what it presently is. It's the size of an American football field. It's very large. But now that it's built up and fully operational, and we're having a lot more crew members visit, we can actually do what its purpose was, which is a space laboratory. So we can do science research up there, which is huge. And I know we have a lot more scientists too going to the space station, so they're super jazzed about being up there and having more time to really work on, hard cell research, combustion research. There's the gamut. So it's special, one, just to have any international collaboration, but to have an international collaboration that's been sustained for so long and benefiting humanity in a really special way, at least like medically and scientifically, is really special.
Great, that's so amazing. Okay, so taking us from a little bit about the future into the past, because you do have one of the coolest jobs on the planet. You do. And how did this happen? You grew up in rural Pennsylvania, is that right?
Right. Yeah, I grew up in Sunbury, Pennsylvania, very small town, actually very similar to Star City. Star City is a small walled city, and we even had a wall in Sunbury, Pennsylvania, not to be isolated. It was more for flooding purposes, but it's very similar and it's forested, a very small population. Um, yeah, I grew up, I was always fascinated with space and just naturally science. And yeah, from the age of 5, I wanted to be an astronaut. Of course, I didn't know any engineers or even really scientists at the time. But luckily, there was an outreach program called Saturday Science at a local university and I'm not a morning person. I never was, and my parents aren't either, but we would wake up early on Saturday mornings and go to this local university for STEM outreach education. And what's cool hindsight is it was sponsored through the Space Grant Consortium, which is funded by NASA. So it's really fascinating. If you track my life, there's actually a longitudinal study, and I always contribute to it. From the age of 7 through funding through college, everything, and then my NASA internships. I've been like a direct product of NASA. So it's really special, and I feel like such a obligation in a good way to contribute to NASA because it was able to expose me to science and engineering in a really exciting way, and then also just be that support network I needed to get to where I wanted to go. So really
That's
grateful for it.
amazing. I hope you don't mind me mentioning, but when you came to visit Scotland, and I met you in Wigtown, you did something so kind on your holiday. You went to the Wigtown Primary School and did a little presentation for them. It had pictures of some of the training astronauts, and they still talk about it. I don't remember how many
Oh,
years
no
ago this was,
way.
but they do. You made
That's
such an
great.
impact. And I think that in terms of places with a rural distribution of people like Scotland, for especially women and young girls who are interested in STEM education, that kind of outreach that you experienced and that you did participate in while you're here is so important. Do you have any insights about that or can speak to that, or any
Yeah,
advice for Scotland
absolutely.
universities who are trying to
Yeah.
do that?
It's difficult. There really is. And, I was fortunate with that program, but there might be another town, whether it's in the United States, Scotland, or Afghanistan, right? They might not have that opportunity.
Yeah.
But I would encourage students to reach out. Like I was even like emailing NASA, just anyone who would listen to me when I was little. I remember I don't even know if Google was around, but I was like searching for how to work at NASA. So I think I contacted, it was either DC headquarters or Goddard. And they even said, yes, you're willing to like work for us for free. Sure. But you have to live in the DC area. And I was like, no, like my parents won't let me leave. So reach out. Surprisingly, sometimes you'll get responses on that. But also I even, I made friends, I guess I was probably early high school with a scientist at NASA Johnson Space Center. And while we don't work together or anything now, I mean, she was really willing to answer all of my questions and just almost serve as a mentor for me remotely. So I think just try to take the initiative. And yeah, you might get some people who never respond to you, but don't take it personally. They might be busy, or you'll eventually find that person. And I'm obviously more than happy to speak to people too if they want and it's helpful.
That's
Um,
great. We got to get you to come back here. Maybe even take a tour of the Highlands. Okay, last question, because I know James has a huge Q&A, which is I'm very excited to hear. But my last question is this: the creative industries and the scientific industries, there's so many parallels from project-oriented work. One of the things I'd really love to hear your thoughts on is the idea of international collaboration, because more and more, especially film projects, are looking at co-producers, are having to trust their international partners to come up with a part of the funding or the project itself. I know NASA excels in that. So from your point of view, are there any tips of the trade in terms of working with an international collaboration in a project?
yeah. My observation, and of course there's still difficulties, international collaboration, like, the scientists and engineers are all on board. And obviously sometimes our hands are held with politics or budget. But And I think this is true in any, diverse group, not just international, but I've noticed our strength is we all agree on like a unifying mission and believe in it.
Yeah.
And that's something that you kind of can't take away from people, and they'll find out ways to make it happen. Even if their hands are tied, whether it's lobbying, your Congress or your government, people find ways to make it happen. And that is something that is really special to see, like the science and engineering thrive despite maybe not the easiest
Totally.
applications to make it happen. So
I,
yeah, I think just having a unifying mission and getting everyone on board with what they're excited about is really special.
Great, that's awesome. And something that's a little bit more lowbrow that I have noticed is food. I mean, you have pictures of lovely food on your Instagram too, but like food brings people together.
It really does, and that's something that I've come to value here here in Russia. Actually, culturally, it's very. I'm sometimes when I'm in my work mode anyway, I'm like super okay, like let's not talk, like let's just get moving. But here, it's like no, 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 like we're sitting down, we're having tea and our cookies, and then we're getting on with our day. And so that was a little like hard for me to get used to, but I now see the value of it. Right? It's yes, like you're talking and catching up, and of course I like that. It was just hard for me to get used to, right, in a more like structured work environment. But I've seen our relationships blossom as a result of it. And also you end up kind of just solving your work problems over your coffee or tea. So yeah, food has been very, very valuable connection.
Yeah, I love the cookie factor. Grier, thank you so much. Okay, James, on to you.
Thank you for joining us today, Grier. We've put some questions together just to ask you. So my first one would be, people think of the creative industries as being arts as opposed to creative thinking. And we do know that some astronauts can be very creative in what they do. Chris Hadfield, for example, covered David Bowie's Space Odyssey from the International Space Station, which was awesome. When you were training astronauts, did you train them to think creatively in order to solve problems?
Absolutely. Yeah. When you think of engineering, I don't think creative necessarily comes to mind, unfortunately, but I mean, that's absolutely what you need to solve problems, particularly in space. So when you're on a spacewalk, for example, there's a lot, it seems simple. They're outside, they're wearing their white spacesuit, but there is actually so much prep work going into it to try to, flesh out a very specific mission. There's a lot of prep work just physically getting them ready. And it's, a lot of time and money to make sure it's safe and they go out the door. So once you're actually on that spacewalk, it's about 6.5 hours to accomplish a mission. It's a very specific mission. It might be fixing a pump module or repairing the robotic arm. So when they're out, and naturally things always go wrong. And so we have some ideas of what could go wrong and maybe some potential solutions, but really we have to train them, like mission control, we're here, we can help you, but really you're the one out there, you're on the time limit. Try to, look at, what tools do you have available with you? What other things, and it's not just tools, but what other body positionings can you be doing to get better leverage to maybe overcome a detent they're having issues to remove something. So yeah, it's more empowering them to be creative to overcome those problems when they're on their own on that spacewalk. So creativity is like essential for spacewalks and spaceflight.
Amazing, thank you for that. And is that something that you yourself personally would have had to have been creative about? Because I mean, do you have firsthand experience of spacewalking, for example, or did you have to put yourself into that mindset?
That's a great question. So of course, I'm not an astronaut, so I haven't been to space or done a spacewalk, unfortunately. Luckily, we do pretty much all of the same training astronauts do, except for the spacewalk in advance, and then do it a lot. So then we become the experts in it, if you will. So yeah, there has been a lot of kind of imagination or, trying to envision what you're trying to put yourself in that environment, one, the stress environment, but the physical environment. And yeah, just, I guess, being creative myself in thinking of what they might have to meet.
Amazing. Thank you very much. So you work for NASA. That's what I'm just saying, that is awesome. What was your first day working for NASA like, and what is your typical day like now, and how has it changed over time?
Yeah, so my very first day working at NASA was actually as an intern in 2008. Um, I remember really quick, I got the phone call on October 4th, 2007, which is the anniversary of the Sputnik, like the first satellite in space.
Mhm.
And that was my nickname growing up, right? So I get this call and I realize the date and I tell the person who selected me, I was like, oh my gosh, like, did you know today's Sputnik's like anniversary? And they're like, oh my God, like we selected the right person. Like, who knows this and who is that excited about it? So first off, of course, I was very excited. Same with my first day at work. I remember I was like, had my, of course, I think most people do this. You have your clothes set out like in advance and everything. And what's really special about the Johnson Space Center is that when you actually drive through the gates, you pass by these like massive rockets. Like there's literally rockets that you're passing by in a field of flowers. And I remember just driving by and being like, wow, like I made it. Like, this is my opportunity. And then the building that I worked in, I walked right by like the silver doors of mission control. And that was just, a dream come true at what you envision. So it was good. I remember I couldn't even eat my lunch because I was so nervous and excited. But yeah, it was really great.
So cool.
And how is the internet connection? Is it okay?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah. So you stated there that you worked in Johnson Space Center as well, and now that you're based in Star City in Russia, are there any interesting differences?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm trying to think. There's no rocket that we pass by, but there are still a lot of really cool things that like make you feel the presence of spaceflight here, like a massive statue of Yuri Gagarin. And so there's that aspect, of course. But in terms of maybe like differences in Star City and how Russia approaches spaceflight, the training is in some ways a little more difficult in the sense that it's more flight-like. So for instance, our crew members will maybe complain that their knees hurt a lot because they're cramped in their ascent and entry suit, the Sokol spacesuit, crammed in the Soyuz in this really small environment. And, they make them sweat it out, right? Like this is what it's going to be like, on orbit. Maybe pushing the limits a little more and what's safe to make it a more realistic environment, like real smoke environments, which maybe the US isn't as comfortable with. And I don't know if that's like OSHA requirements or what, but I do, while it's difficult for the crew members, they will say, hey, like this is great training, right? It's really flight-like and really prepares you for the real thing. It just makes the 2 years leading up to spaceflight a little more difficult over here.
Thank you for that. So you said that in Johnson Space Center, you were obviously walking through a rocket garden. So you'll see all the rockets, for example. If you could have been involved with any of the eras of space exploration, which one would it be? Is it any from the past, any from now, or any from the future, or just all of them in general?
It's a great question. And had you asked me a couple of years ago before the Artemis program was announced, I would have absolutely said like, the Mercury Apollo era, because that was where things were really turning. Like they didn't know if they were going to be successful. They just really wanted to go and we're going to try to figure it out and make it happen. So I think that time would have been very exciting. But with Artemis now going back to the moon and eventually onto Mars, like we have that same energy. Things are really moving along quite quickly. A lot more quickly than it has been in the past couple of years. But that's where the excitement is. Everyone wants to go somewhere and do it together. So I'm actually happy in the Artemis phase right now.
Amazing. And then one last sort of serious question is that we were commenting on the medical industry has rallied around a single cause of vaccine for COVID. Now, if the entire space industry globally were to rally together at the same scale, what would you like to see it solve collectively?
That's a great question. So of course, like I want to focus on what we're doing with exploration because I think that helps us answer some of the issues we have on Earth, particularly climate change. But if we were to concentrate on one thing, I think it would be climate change. I think it, matches our skill set really well. And of course, we're interested in planets, and we forget, I guess, the Earth is a planet too, even though it's our home. So I would love to see the international collaboration working together to solve that, because of course, it's not necessarily our problem right now, but it's going to be for generations in the future. And I think we could solve it.
Completely agree. That's an amazing answer. Thank you. So we have some fun ones here as well. So if you were to get to experience a spacewalk yourself, would you soundtrack it to any track in particular?
I would probably like to, and I can't think of which song off the top of my head. Although maybe Hans Zimmer or something, a more upbeat Hans Zimmer, not a doom and gloom one, because it would feel very, appropriate. But also because spacewalk takes so much concentration, I'd probably want to, at least my first time, not have any music at all.
X-Men Earth obviously has links with the film industry, so naturally we like to talk about movies. Do you watch space movies? And if so, what are your favorites?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And I do have some curmudgeon-y employee, coworkers who sometimes are like, oh, well, that's not real. And I'm like, of course it's not, that's, and there are some that are like grossly incorrect where you're like, okay, like I can't, I have to turn this one off. But for the most part, I'm able to suspend, disbelief. Like, for example, Gravity is a great movie in terms of like watching crew members do a spacewalk. I mean, they're even using some of the tools that we use and train crew members. But there are parts where they're like, oh, I just started training 6 months ago, and they don't even know each other. Like they would know each other very well. They would have trained for years. But in terms of favorite movies, I loved Interstellar. I really like that one because it felt more like human, that aspect of it. And it's really beautifully done, and helps you kind of imagine what things could be in the far future. And then the other one I like is The Martian. And that one is because well, of course it's not real. We haven't sent humans to Mars. All the technology is real. We just haven't executed it yet, at least for the most part. So that was cool to see because, we even had talking discussions at work about the movie because it was just visualizing what we're already doing. And it just was a really great means to have a discussion about what we're doing and what that might look like and issues we might encounter. So I think those would be my two favorite.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. And we have one last question as well, which is from one of our colleagues. And it is, do astronauts know about dinosaurs?
I would say for the most part, they do know about dinosaurs, but I love that question because it's, applicable to, where life was, where life is now, and where it's going. But I actually conducted like a simulated Mars mission in Utah in 2009 and 2010. You literally live in a habitat, you wear a spacesuit, and you go on, field expeditions. And on one of those spacewalks on, quote unquote Mars, we actually discovered dinosaur bones. So, the 5-year-old in me was very, very excited about this. Of course, we don't expect to find that on Mars, but it was a really a cool kind of parallel to the types of things we might find on another planet. And unfortunately, I don't know what happened with it. We turned it over to the Bureau of Land Management, and they, probably assigned it to someone. But that was pretty cool. Apparently, it was a brontosaurus. So
cool. Thank you very much. Thanks for all those answers. They're really, really interesting to hear. Thank you.
Grier,
thank you for having me.
That's awesome. I feel like that opens up a whole new career of space archaeology, where you could be an archaeologist on different planets. That would be awesome. Okay, one last thing too. You've been so kind and patient. We've extended the time just because Grier's so fascinating, and it's so exciting to have you here visiting us from Russia. We always end Expo North Digital Shorts with one small bit of advice. And it could be something that you found really helpful through your career. It could be something a parent told you, a grandparent, a friend. In the past, we've had people say, get enough sleep or never make a decision unless you've had a nice, good meal. Whatever it is there something that for you use day to day that you find very helpful?
I would say be curious. And that's something that has yielded like opportunity, of course, right? Because I'm curious about something, I learn about it, and then I know it and it helps me for a future job. But honestly, it's just yielded the most joy, whether that's like curious, I'm that person on a hike that's like picking up a rock and, marveling at it and also wondering about it. But so it's been good for me in multiple ways. And I think other people will, enjoy it too.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And one of my favorite quotes is by Samuel Johnson, and he said, "Curiosity in great and generous minds is the first passion and the last," which I love.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, I totally agree. Great. Thank you very much. I cannot wait till we get you over on our shores at some point soon.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to coming back to Scotland. I miss it.
Take care, Grier.